Hello YouTube, this is Sam Girrans from Qur'anite.com. Today is Tuesday, 12th of September 2017, and today the subject is modern idols. And this is a bit of an impromptu talk, but something which comes into my mind on a regular basis. So hopefully I'll be able to work my way through it without too much trouble. And I'm going to also read a few verses which in some ways touch on what I want to talk about. But firstly, the question of idolatry. Now, we have rather a primitive notion in the main when one thinks about idolatry. The golden calf, I suppose, would be the archetypal idol. But idols come in all shapes and sizes. And if we accept the postulate that there is one God and God made everything, and that God is behind, is the primary mover of all things, that everything that you get is from God and everything that you lose is by the will of God, that we are, as it were, to put it into modern parlance, operating entirely within God's matrix, then there is nothing within this matrix that was not made by God. Okay? So any excuse me. So the ascribing of any form of power to anything other than God is idolatry. Now, what do we mean by ascribing power? Well, what do we look to God for? We look to God for truth, and we look to God for security. And I think that these are the main things that one looks to God for. Security in all senses. Now, in a way, there are things that we need within this life, in this dunya, to put it into the sort of Quranic term, which in certain measure are not idols, but they can become idols. An obvious example would be food. We need food to live. So food is not by virtue of what it is an idol. However, by expanding beyond a certain point, and depending on whether one looks to it for one's happiness and security, and to some extent one looks for one's meaning within it, then it can become a god, an idol. Now, what the interesting thing is to me is that how people defend their idols. And I'll get into some more modern day idols in a moment, but I want to read this portion from the Qur'an. It's from chapter 38, and it begins at verse 4. I'd like to read through to 7, and it reads, "And they are amazed that a warner has come to them from among themselves. And those who spurn guidance while claiming virtue say, this is a sorcerer, a teller of lies. Has he made the gods one God? This is an amazing thing. And the eminent ones among them step forward. Go and be steadfast to your gods. This is the thing to do. We heard not of this in the latter creed. This is only a fabrication." Now, what's interesting to me here, or the things I'd like to identify or underline, are that people, the sort of leaders, as it were, or the eminent ones in whatever field, they step forward to defend the idols. And not only that, but they actually command other people to step forward and to defend them. We heard not of this in the latter creed. What do you mean, the latter creed? Well, what's recently been around, what people recently believe. So this doesn't concur with what the latter creed, well, what we know of now. This is only a fabrication. So this is their argument. Now, whilst our society purports to be secular. It's anything but secular. The people at the very top that I'm not going to concentrate on here because it's too abstract, but they're not secular. They are highly religious in their own ways. But at the level of of us, just as it were, average people, normal people, people who aren't members of the ruling elite, at that level, most people think that they are secular, but they are religious. They have a religion. It's a form of polytheism. Why? Because they don't give glory to God for what He's given them, but they do ascribe certain powers to other things, and this is really what I mean by idolatry. And it comes in all shapes and sizes. It's not just bowing down to a box or bowing down to anything physically. It's how one spends one's time. It's what one expects to bring one security and safety and significance and meaning. This is your God. So I'll just sort of go through some of the more common ones. I don't think I'm going to be shocking anyone here by saying that this is the case today with money and success. Now, one needs a certain amount of stuff in the world to survive, continuing on my thought about food. But when one makes this the thing and one looks to it for happiness and worships it, then it has become a god. It is actually an idol. And fame today, which has become, it's been democratized. Fame used to be something, in fact, money and success used to be the preserve of the rich. And what's happened now is that these things have now become made very common. It used to be that only the rich could exchange clothes on a fashion basis. Average people used to wear clothes for practical purposes. They would have probably 2 suits of clothes, one for work and one their Sunday best, and that was it. And they replaced each item as it wore out, and that was all. And that's what I do. I own 2 pairs of trousers. I'm not saying everyone else has to do this, but I've made the decision that I'm not going to be ruled by these things. I own 3 t-shirts, 2 shirts, 2 pairs of trousers. That's really it. And because these things for me have only a practical purpose. I don't need a huge wardrobe of stuff. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with anyone who's got 10 times more than what I've got. That's fine, 100 times, whatever. But what I'm saying is it's how you relate to it, and if you look to it for your happiness. But the broader point is that it's only quite recent that as it were, this ability to pander to your fashion desires has been sort of thrown open to the unwashed masses. Another form of idolatry is opinion leaders. Now, I experienced this from several sides. And what's interesting about this, and I have to preface this by saying firstly what I mean by an opinion leader, and secondly why I know what an opinion leader is. What an opinion leader is somebody, it's like a bellwether with sheep. It's somebody that the sheep follow. And you get these in all areas. Whether it's economics would be a very classical one. You would have, say for example, George Soros says this is going to happen. The sheep gets spooked, and they all start investing in whatever it is. That's what an opinion leader is, and you can have an opinion leader in all kinds of things. The Kardashians, I don't really know anything about them, but I have a general impression of what they are and what they do. They are to a huge number of people opinion leaders. It's not that what they say has any intrinsic value. It's who says it, and quite often how they say it, that makes the big difference. And the reason why I know this is because for better or for worse, for a few years I worked in public relations, so I had to understand what all this stuff was. What public relations people discovered was that most people don't think. Now, they're not drawing any moral conclusions here. They're just stating it as a fact. They know this is the case, and it is the case. Most people won't think. They won't. And this is what advertising discovered. If you look at people like Bernays, who was the nephew of Freud, and actually he was a great, very popular with Goebbels, among many other people. He really popularized the concept that people don't buy on the basis of fact. For example, you could say, this is a very good car. You can go 5 miles faster an hour, and it uses 5 liters less a month of petrol or something than the other car. That's not what people will buy. What people will buy is a feeling often about themselves. And this is how opinions work. Opinions is a form of buying. You're buying into something. You're associating yourself with this product, this intellectual product. Now, the way that it works is that most people won't think for themselves. They won't. They just won't. And advertisers know this, and they're right. So in a way, I mean, let's taking the Quranic stance, where we're called upon to, why will they not consider the Qur'an with care? For one, or we're just asked to use our reason. God has given us reason. He's given us logic. This is how we are different. This was the point made by the ancient Greeks. Say, how are we different from the animals? Well, we're different from the animals because we are able to reason. However, most people won't. However, we are called to do so. But again, like sheep will follow the bellwether. They'll follow the opinion leader. And in this sense, an opinion leader has become an idol in some way in the mind of the people who follow. They're following because most people want to be normal. They want to be liked. They don't want to rock the boat, and they're afraid. And they want security. Again, this is the big thing. Security. It's where your security lies. And most people feel that their security lies with being tight with the majority. And to some extent, they're right, but in a very short-sighted way. Surely the greatest security is to be tight with God. However, that's not a very popular point of view, but it doesn't make it wrong. However, I want to really just emphasize this response. This is an archetypal response. And the eminent ones among them step forward. Go and be steadfast to your gods. This is the thing to do. We heard not of this in the latter creed. So what they're doing is from a rhetorical point of view, they're citing what is currently popular as the thing, as the arbiter of what is right and what is wrong. And these, not tricks, but these conventions in rhetorical argument are used, which brings me on to today, which in order to enforce or to ring fence, to protect the current dogma, which brings me to my next point, which would be to that of science in inverted commas. Now, before I get into this, I want to say that real science just means knowledge. It means what is known, what we know. And the scientific method, when applied, is superb. I use it myself. The problem is that science has been co-opted, or it's divided into various manifestations and concentric circles, far proximities to and from this core idea of what science is. Science is something which is demonstrable, repeatable, provable. It's not just something that you can describe with mathematics. I mean, you can describe anything with mathematics, just as you can describe anything with words. Mathematics by themselves don't mean anything other than mathematically you can describe an idea. Well, you can describe all kinds of things. You could describe an elephant being lighter than a feather with mathematics. Mathematics is just a means. It's not because when you see, you and I who had government education, most of us, when we think of mathematics, we think 2 + 2 is 4, therefore this is right. This isn't how this isn't how higher mathematics works exactly. It's a descriptive process. So what mathematics can do is provide as it were, a kind of fuselage for things which are known and are provable, but they do not prove things in and of themselves necessarily. Now, there are ideas which are current today, many of them, which often cite mathematics, but that you and I cannot prove. In fact, no one can really prove them. And going beyond mathematics into the realms of biology and so forth, there are theories, and they are theories which are very interesting theories. They're not original, they're not new. I'm talking here mainly about evolution. I'm talking about macroevolution, not microevolution, not evolution within a species. That we have evidence for. I'm talking about macroevolution. It's an idea, and I'm all ears when we get to the real evidence of it, but evidence that is not a theory, but actually proven, demonstrable, repeatable, this kind of thing, you see. And in the meantime, under science, under the rules of actual science, it remains a theory, and it's a theory with a great deal of validity and interesting, one among many. But the problem is that when these theories then start to arrogate to themselves the value of fact, and to attack and persecute people who are still waiting for actual evidence, at that point, because they haven't got the facts there, they become a type of a god. And we see this in many areas today. Things which are creeds, they are latter creeds. They're things which have huge funding behind them. We're taught to them and have them rammed down our throats from day one. And what's very interesting to me is if you challenge one of them, the level of vitriol, the level of attack that you'll get is disproportionate. In the words of Shakespeare, methinks thou dost protest too much. If you're really sure about something, if you're really sure about it, that's not the response. But people respond in certain areas which have become the preserve of scientism, and I'm not going to get into what they are right now, because if you know what I'm talking about, you already know, and if you don't, this isn't the main focus for me of getting into these in this video. But my point is that these have become gods, they've become idols, and the response is that, has he made the gods one god? So are you saying that this evolution and this and all these things that we've got CGI for and all these wonderful pictures, you're saying that God made all? This is really the response. But the Quranic position is, yes, that's correct. God made all things. But the response too is that we heard not of this in the latter creed. Now, if we're taking the Quran as our position, then that should be how we regard things. And the Quran calls us to use our minds, but it also asks us for evidence. Not just a lot of people think this, or this is now the popular thing, or this is, if you don't accept this or go along with this, therefore you're not going to be credible. I mean, think about the things that have been accepted as credible through history. We're either able to use our minds or we're not able to use our minds. And really the point I'm trying to get across here is when we abdicate our responsibility to use our own minds, then we really, in my opinion at least, have strayed into the provenance of idolatry. Why? Because we are arrogating to others the responsibility for making up the shortfall between who we are and what God has given us. God gave us the intellect and the mind for a reason, so that we could make up that shortfall. We're that close, but we do have to try. And when we refuse to try because we're just going to outsource this to someone else, in my opinion, we've really fallen straight into the provenance, as I say, of idolatry. And this appeal, we heard not of this in the latter creed. Think of the things which have become orthodoxy in the last 50 or 100 years, that you must believe in order to hold tenure in a university, in order to be taken seriously as a journalist, all of these things. But where is the evidence? I'm talking beyond pictures, films of, CGI. I'm talking real evidence. If something's true, then it's true. It can be measured. Anyway, we'll go on to the next one. Sexual freedom. Now, we're told that, and this is the latter creed, that we're all free sexually, that it's a choice thing. It's your body. You just do it. Well, is it your body? Did you make your body? No, you didn't. It's your life. This is another one that if you're not hurting anyone else, then it's acceptable. Of course, the arbiter of hurting anyone else, that's just you, and we have to trust your or one's changing instincts and desires and lusts for that. But there you are. But this now is orthodoxy. If you challenge that and you say, no, you don't have sexual freedom. What you have is sexual responsibility. What you have is sexual opportunities and choices within a remit that God has given you. See how far you get with that today. Try going into a school as a teacher and supporting the idea of sexual continence until marriage. You'd be fired. In the West, you'd be out of a job. But this is the latter creed. So part of my point is that if the Qur'an is true, then it doesn't just mean that we take the bits that we like of it and the bits which just happen to fit in with what today is acceptable and so on. Nor does it mean that we twist the words of it in order to fit in with what's going to make us acceptable. It's that what we can measure in this world, what we can really measure, does not conflict with what God has given us. And in those cases where we cannot measure, because we're talking about moral imperatives, we trust the word of God, if it be the word of God, and we submit to that, even if it means we take a bit of flack. I would argue that less than that is, again, wandering into the realms of idolatry. I like very much this quote from the Jewish Bible. It says, if God be God, then serve him, and if Baal be God, then serve him. But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. Surely this is the right position. The world that we're living in now is Baalistic. You're going to have to choose. And we're going to have to choose now. See, a lot of people understand that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and they're full of prognostications and, end of the world scenarios and how heroic they're going to be when the Antichrist or the Dajjal or whatever, non-Quranic concept they've got is going to be bearing down on them with these, big scary claws and everything. But they won't start now. You see, it starts now. As I talked about in one of my things about food, try now getting free of sugar, just sugar. Forget about the Antichrist and the Dajjal and the sort of New World Order robot troops. Just give up sugar. Find out how much of a hero you really are. I tell you, it's tough. And when I say sugar, I don't just mean added sugar. I mean anything with sugar in it, if you can find it. And before you do that, look up all the other synonyms for sugar, because there are many of them. Tough. Yet it tells us in the Qur'an that we should eat good food. Now that's a challenge. Start with that, eating good food, because it's a struggle. You won't find much. 96% of what you find in a supermarket is weaponized. Anything with sugar in it, weaponized. It's weaponized. And that's before we get into GMO and all this other stuff. So, it's more nuanced than people think. And that's really it. I mean, that's my main point. People make grandiose claims, and if you want some perspective, some historical perspective, read Greek, read pre-Socratic philosophers. It doesn't be difficult. I'm sure you can find some sort of summary on Wikipedia or something. Just go through what people believed. Thales, Anaximenes, Empedocles. Just read what they believed. You can find a summary. Insofar as we can work out what they believed. Just to get an idea that people have believed very different things. Very intelligent people have believed very different things. And I'm not going to kind of give a lecture on pre-Socratic philosophy, but I mean, the whole point about Thales and the school of Miletus was that the whole philosophical concept was science. This is what science was. But it looks kind of silly according to the latter creed, the creed that we have now. And yet there are a lot of comparable parts to this. But they didn't have their evidence, and we don't have ours. So who are you going to believe? Well, I would suggest using your reason and starting with you, because at the end of the day, you're responsible for what you buy, and I'm responsible for what I buy, and we are responsible for not worshipping idols. And if something is not true, in the Qur'an it says that the eyes and the ears, they will be asked. We will have to give account for what we bought into. We've been given reason for a reason. So all I'm saying is that we should use it. And just citing authorities, whether they be secular or so-called religious, is still a form of idolatry. In the Qur'an, we do not make lords among ourselves. The sovereign sense within you is your reason and your intellect. You've been given it for a reason. And if you're not satisfied with the answers that you're being given, then it's your responsibility to look further. But we should not hold to that of which we have no knowledge. And I think this is my main point, is that we're asked by modern so-called science to believe things that we have no knowledge of these things other than pictures and priests. And this is the new priesthood, the secular priesthood. And they use the same tricks as the old one, that you're a heretic, that if you don't believe it. But you say, yes, but proof. No, you're just a heretic. Attack. Well, we have what they have, we have what we have. Look for evidence and don't accept it unless you have it. And don't be afraid to say you don't know. Don't know is fine. But, when people make these very, very strong claims about things that they don't have evidence for and that you can't verify, then I think we should be suspicious and we should regard them as idols. That's all for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Qur'an free using the button in the top right-hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. I also encourage you to sign up for the Qur'anite Plus newsletter on the site to get occasional micro updates. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short, eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.